Welcome to today's webinar, Understanding Islam, an interfaith dialogue with Muslim Americans, moderated by Dr. Selden Harris. This webinar is sponsored by Union Presbyterian Seminary's Leadership Institute, which administers all of the continuing education and non-degree programming for the seminary. Following the presentation from the panelists, we will field questions from you, the audience. So please enter your questions in the chat throughout the presentation. A recording of the webinar will be shared with all registered attendees after the event. Tinsley Jones serves as the Director of Program Development for the Leadership Institute. Tinsley, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Union Presbyterian Seminary and the Leadership Institute, we welcome you to today's webinar. We're glad that you could be with us today. I have the pleasure of introducing the moderator for today's webinar, Dr. Selden Harris. Dr. Harris was born in Charlottesville, Virginia, and grew up in Blackstone, Virginia. He received an undergraduate degree from Hampton-Sydney College, a Master of Divinity from Union Presbyterian Seminary, and graduate degrees from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. He also holds a Bachelor in Islamic Law from the Islamic Education Center in Potomac, Maryland. He is an ordained pastor in the Presbyterian Church USA and served churches in Texas and Virginia, retiring in 2013, having served for 30 years. While serving churches, he also taught at Patrick Henry Community College in Martinsville, Virginia, and at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Austin, Texas. Currently, he is a professor at Hujjah Islamic Seminary in Dearborn, Michigan, which is a unique institution in that the language of instruction is in English. Dr. Harris, welcome. Thank you for being here, and I pass the floor to you.
Thank you, Tinsley. And assalamu alaikum to everybody, to my wonderful sister and brother who are with us from Dearborn, Michigan, and all the people out there in the Union Presbyterian families. I'm so glad that all of you are here. It is my hope and my prayer that this will whet your appetite, that you will want to get to know your Muslim sisters and brothers that are Americans. I read a statistic the other day that only 38% of Americans actually have any Muslim friends. And for those 38%, that is a loss, because the Muslim American community is one of the greatest communities on the planet. Did you know that Muslim Americans are the second most educated family in our entire American family? That's very, very, very special. Now, I am going to do as little speaking as I can today because I want for you to hear from the three people that are here. Very quickly, I want to give you a little bit of background as to Islam in America and how Muslims got here. And then you're going to hear some statements from our three guests, and then we're going to have a question and answer. I took early retirement after 30 years at age 55 because I wanted to study more the Muslim communities in the United States of America. Let me tell you what led up to that. At my last church in Virginia Beach in 2009, we resettled a family, a Shia Muslim family from Baghdad, Iraq to Virginia Beach. They are still here. They were asylees because the husband of the group worked for the U.S. military. They were found out and were given immediate asylum in Baghdad before they came to Virginia Beach. There's a mother and a father, two little girls. Dina was 2 years old. When I took the family down the ocean front, she immediately looked at the ocean and said, "Al-Bahri," which is the Arabic word for water. She knew very little English at that point. But I told the family that I had no intention of dragging them to the baptismal font. I told them that I respected the truth of their religion. I had a friend who was an imam of a mosque in Norfolk who would take them there. They said, "No, we want to go to the church." And it ended up being one of the most wonderful interfaith experiences I have ever had in my life. Just a quick follow-up. The oldest daughter, Sama, who is a little girl, I used to have lunch with her one day a week at her elementary school. She graduated #1 in her class, valedictorian at Princess Anne High School in Virginia Beach, the inner baccalaureate school. And she's now a student at Harvard University, where I believe she'll be one of the best lawyers we have ever seen. So so that's why I retired earlier. I took a trip to the Islamic Republic of the Gambia in West Africa. We'll come back to why I went there, because that speaks to the question of Islam in America too. I want to introduce the people at the bottom of the screen. There is my brother, Sayyid Muhammad Kazwini. You're going to be hearing more about him. He is one of the imams at the Islamic Institute of America, and he is the creator of the Hujjah Islamic Seminary in Dearborn. To his left is Dr. Mary Assel. She is a retired professor and is a published author. And you'll be hearing more about her. I'm not going to say anything because I want them to tell you about themselves. And above her is Siham Jafari. She is an amazing person. You can see in her biography that she is a owner of a conflict management company. She is well connected throughout the state of Michigan, and she is a real example, a role model to a lot of women in this country, Christian, Jews, and Muslims, or no faith, of what the possibilities are. So I look forward for you all hearing from them soon. Now, before I give the background, I want to say something that I believe to be very, very, very true. First of all, we in the United States, we are all a nation of immigrants. I am from Nottoway County, Virginia. We're named for the local Nottoway Indian tribe. The chief, Allison, was a patient of my late father's. And Chief Allison told me something that I have never forgotten. She said, "We're all immigrants. Even my people. We just got here 18,000 years earlier than most people, but we are all immigrants. And because we're immigrants, we need to understand the immigration stories of everyone. You need to understand the stories of the 3 individuals and all the Muslim Americans you meet, why their ancestors came here whenever they did, because that tells a lot about who they are. And I think one of the reasons why we're so divided as a nation is we do not understand one another's immigration stories. So it is my hope that you will learn more about Muslims in America from this, but you'll be sensitive to other immigration stories. And the other thing is we are not a Christian nation. We are a nation of religious freedom. And in my overview, I'm going to talk a little bit about a very important book in the past called Jefferson's Quran. That Jefferson was very, very influenced by Islam. There is a verse that he was familiar with. It's in Baqarah, the cow. That's the 2nd chapter of the Quran, verse 256. Let there be no compulsion in matters of religion. That impressed Jefferson, and I'll speak more about that. Very quickly, I want to give an overview of Islam in America, looking at the earliest days, colonial days, and finally Dearborn, Michigan, which to me is the most Muslim city in America and is one of the greatest cities on the planet. It's a great town. I wish we were all right at that wonderful sweet shop in Dearborn. I forget the name of it, sipping Turkish coffee and eating good baklava, but we're here, and this will do. From his book, Professor Amir Hussein, Muslims in the Making of America, he writes this. He says, "There has never been an America without Muslims. Let that sink in for those who think that Muslims are relative newcomers in this country. We were here long before 1776. We were first brought here as enslaved West African Muslims. Islam is an American religion." That's right. In 1619, right down the road from me in Hampton, Virginia, the first enslaved West African Muslims came here. A lot of people don't realize that West Africa was not a Christian area. There was no Christianity in West Africa until the 19th century when American Protestant missionaries went there. West Africa has a rich history in Islam. Islam came to West Africa not from North Africa, but from Syria, where Sufi merchants came down to Egypt, went across the Sahel region, which is that widest area of Africa, all down the road there, till they finally settled in the Fouta Djallon region, which is now modern-day Mali, modern-day Gambia, and modern-day Senegal. They created places like Timbuktu, which became the seat of Islamic learning for many, 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 many years. There were many, many enslaved West African Muslims who left us things to tell us who we are. One was a man named Umar ibn Sa'id, who wrote from memory an entire Quran, not in the Maghribi North African script, but in the Mashriki, the script, which you would have seen in Syria, Iraq, and Egypt. A complete Quran he had written from knowledge. There are other such people as Abdul Rahman, as Umar Said, another one. These were people who are West African Muslims who brought to colonial America new agricultural and farming techniques. One of the reasons why cotton was such a king in the American South, it wasn't that the white plantation owners were such great farmers. They weren't. It's because of the techniques that West African Muslim farmers brought to the plantations. Another thing you need to understand is that most of the West African, enslaved West Africans that came here, and by the way, I refuse to call their ancestors slaves. Islamic tradition teaches that God did not create Adam to be parent of a slave. I don't call them slave, I call them enslaved West Africans. Who they are were people created by God. The relationship of evil, where they were stolen from their homeland, enslaved them. But they were always created free people, and they became slaves. One of the things that really, and I believe that the West African Muslims kept their Islamic faith much later than people realize. I have studied documents that suggest even to the eve of the Civil War, they were still there. Let me tell you a quick example. When you read in the slave narratives, which were the oral stories that were written in the 1930s by elderly African Americans who were either children or grandchildren of slaves. And they talked about how after the Sunday preaching, which was the slave religion, we would go out to the praying grounds. And I kept thinking, what are these praying grounds? I sent an email to Dr. Baba Cisse in the Gambia. He was head of the Gambian Center for Arts and Culture. I said, Baba, tell me what these praying grounds are. He called me, said, Sel, that proves they kept their Islamic faith. They were doing salat at those praying grounds. I said, salat is worship for the audience. He said, Sufis brought Islam to West Africa. And so when it came time for their prayers, they wouldn't have used their prayer rugs. They wouldn't sell them. So they would make praying grounds where they would go. We also know that the slaves that came here they could read and they could write. In 1831, Nat Turner led a very big slave revolt in Southampton, Virginia. But he could read and write. His mother and grandmother were from Africa, and they could read and write. What that means is they benefited from the works of a very famous West African Muslim woman, Nana Asma'u, who was the daughter of Uthman Dan Fodio, who was the caliph of the Sokoto Caliphate. And Nana Asma'u had a jihad to make sure that all West African Muslim women had the same education as did West African men, and she succeeded. My doctor here in Virginia Beach, Dr. Kendra Naimi, is a Muslim woman from Nigeria. She will tell you, growing up in Nigeria, she had her education because of Nana Asma'u. So my point being that West African Muslims were the first Muslim community here, and they left something very, very important. Now, if you're watching on the PBS this week, the history of the Black church narrated by Lewis Gates, he points out that even in some of the earliest African-American churches in Sapelo Island, Georgia, in the pews in the aisles, there are Arabic scripts. There are things written from the Quran. That is because it is no question about it that before African Americans were made to adopt the slave religion, they were Muslim. Secondly, Thomas Jefferson's Quran. As a young lawyer, he ordered and bought George Sale's 2-volume commentary on the Quran because when he was in Paris, he became to be very, very interested to see how the Ottoman Empire, even though it was Muslim, from 1299 to 1517, there were more Christians than Muslims. So basically taking dhimmi status, that's Dhimmi, which granted religious freedom to all, the Ottomans created something called millets, Millet, and basically non-Muslims in the Ottoman Empire had full rights of citizenship. Jefferson loved that. He was sick of Christianity. He was sick of institutional clergy. He especially hated Presbyterian clergy like me because he said Presbyterian clergy just want to take over the country, and he might have been right. Jefferson was a deist. He was a deist, which was philosophical Unitarianism. Basically what it is, it's Islam without the Quran. That's what it is. But Jefferson wanted to see that there was freedom of religion. He parted with John Locke, his spiritual mentor, who talked about the importance of tolerance. Jefferson said, not good enough. Tolerance means there's an official religion, but we're going to let the rest of you be here. He said, no, there can be no official religion. Now, Jefferson joined the Episcopal Church, not because he liked England or the Anglican Church, but because colonial Virginia had a rule. In order to own land in Virginia, you had to be in communion with the Episcopal Church. That's the only reason he did it. But as governor of Virginia, he wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which basically disestablished all religions in Virginia, meaning there was no official religion. And he wrote in his notes of Virginia that he looked forward to the day when Muslims, and Jefferson didn't say the wrong word, Mohammedans, he said when Muslims had equal rights of citizenship with all people in the new republic. Since Mr. Trump's ban on Muslims in 2017, a lot of people have gone to the Library of Congress and studied Jefferson's library. Jefferson had the most extensive library in all of colonial America, and in 1826, the Library of Congress bought it. But in his papers, he was aware that the Prophet Muhammad made 5 covenants granting religious freedom to Syriac Christians in the Islamic world, and Jefferson absolutely wanted that. So the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom became enshrined in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which did 2 things. It did not create and establish a religion, nor did it infringe upon the rights of others. Now, I want to say before I move on to Dearborn, when I was in the University of St. Andrews, the Protestant Reformation was very, very violent. And I was in an interfaith group with Church of Scotland people, they were Presbyterians, and a lot of the Iranian students that were at the University of St. Andrews. St. Mary's College, which is the Divinity College, was created as a place in the Protestant Reformation where people of different religious persuasions could have dialogue. And I remember the times I had with those Iranian Muslims. After the break one time, there was a man and a woman there. I don't remember what his name was. He was a chemistry student. Her name was Fatima. She was in medical school. She did the most talking, and I think she dragged her husband there. That sometimes happens, but anyhow. But she came up to me and she said, Mr. Harris, do you know what the inspiration of our revolution was? This is 1986. I said, well, I used to think it was Ayatollah Khomeini, but I've been studying the works of Dr. Ali Shariati, who was an Iranian sociologist. I think it was him. She said, but do you know the documents? I said, no, ma'am. She reached into her pocketbook, pulled out this document. You know what it was? It was the Declaration of Independence. I said, wait a minute. You're telling me that the Declaration of Independence was inspired Iranians to get rid of the Shah? She said, yes, because Mr. Jefferson told you all and us that when your ruler is wrong, you've got to make a change. And everything that Mr. Jefferson said that King George III did, the Shah did against us. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And she said, and you know, we had so hoped that Americans would rally behind us in our revolution. But I tell you, she knew, and she told me there are many of Iranians like her. She knew more about our documents, like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, than most Americans do, who've been here for a long time. And she said to me this, she said, those documents are Islamic documents. God is referred to as creator. We can buy into that. And she said, the reason people want to come to America is because you think that your religious freedom is new, but no, we've had it all along. We have had it all along. And you know what? She's right. She really was. Now, I also want to tell you the last thing. I want to tell you about Dearborn, Michigan, my second favorite city in the United States after Virginia Beach. Can you see this book here? It's called Old Islam in Detroit. You know, Siham, there's a picture here of Yasmin Eastman's parents getting married. You were probably at that wedding, weren't you? There's a little girl standing by Yasmin's mother. I wonder if that was you in the picture. How would you have been at that time? Do you remember? Oh, she doesn't have her mute on. Okay. Well, let me read you something. Let me read you something about Dearborn, and then I want the people. I want the people to who. Let's see here. I want to hear more from the folks. Listen to this. The author Sally Howe writes, Islam in the United States is depending on one's point of view, pan-ethnic, diasporic, and wide. And she goes on to say that Dearborn, Michigan, has the most diverse group of Muslims anywhere in the world, including the Hajj at Mecca. How about that? And I have found that to be the case. She also goes on to say that that Muslims have been coming to Dearborn since the 1860s. And just a couple of quick things she says in here. The earliest were mainly people were from Lebanon. They'd be from the south of Lebanon, not the Maronite part of Lebanon, which was Christian, but the southern part. And they came from Albania and they came from South India. Very interesting. In 1965, when immigration laws were open and more Muslims started coming to Dearborn, they came and they saw the old Islam, hence the name of the book. And the new group of Muslim immigrants that came to Dearborn after 1965 said this about the old Islam. It said, well, they're very unorthodox and they're very American. Isn't that interesting? But it shows the diversity of the people. There's a legend about Henry Ford. Everybody knows who Henry Ford is, that he met a man from Yemen who just gotten off the boat. And he told this man, I'll pay you $5 a day to work in my factory. And this man from Yemen was able to bring 100 extra workers to Mr. Ford. So, I mean, there are great stories. The last thing I'll tell you is the first time I ever went to Dearborn, I rode around with three imams. I didn't know you, Sayyid Qazwini, then. I went with Imam Elahi, who is Iranian, Sheikh Husseini, who is Iraqi, and Sheikh Habab, who is Lebanese. And we were in somebody's Datsun pickup truck, and for 5 hours we just rode all around Dearborn, stopped drinking coffee, eating sweets, talking about Islamic philosophers. Probably the best afternoon I've ever spent in my life. But you know, a lot of people talk about how Americans, you know, joke around where people are from. They were doing that too. Now, of the four of us, I was the only one without a turban and a beard. I didn't have one. But Sheikh Husseini leaned over me and said, "Listen, we don't let Sheikh Habab pick the place to eat." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Well, he's Lebanese, and the Lebanese put garlic on everything, including sweets. So we can't have him do that." But you see, they joke around just like we in Virginia joke around with people from North Carolina. I mean, the Muslim Americans I have found in Dearborn are very, very, very assimilated. So I'm going to be quiet, and I want you to hear from these wonderful people who are my brother and my sisters. Mary.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Harris, for working on this webinar. Really, you're allowing us to share with your congregation, and guests from around the country what it means to be a Muslim in America, specifically in Dearborn, Michigan. So I will speak about Muslim women in general, Muslim women in our cities, and a brief mention of my personal story. And I'm so glad to be participating with Imam Qazwini's son, Muhammad Qazwini, and Siham, a very, very good friend of mine. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Contrary to the Western belief that Muslim women are submissive and oppressed, a survey released by the Gallup organization in 25 reveals that what bothered them the most wasn't the hijab at all. And it was for people to accept them as sisters, mothers, wives, and daughters. What they were afraid of is they don't speak up and they don't tell the world what Muslim women are really about, and that would include myself and many others. Someone else is going to say, "Oh, this is what they're about," and they did not want that to happen. They didn't want to be branded. They wanted to speak up and let people know who they were, and that's why we're here today. Many Muslim women in Dearborn and around the world perceive the hijab, if we're talking about the hijab, because that's really what distinguishes them from other women. It's just a sign of modesty, not submissiveness. And Muslim women will not allow themselves to be relegated to the background. You know, I don't, just because she's wearing a hijab, she won't do anything. They believe that Islam gives them many privileges, and among them, the right to pursue political status, individual freedom, and education. Second, not all Muslim women wear the hijab, and that certainly doesn't mean that they're less Muslim or they melted away with everybody else. It's just, to them, it's just a matter of conviction, but that doesn't mean they don't practice their religion. So, are Muslim women oppressed? Some may be. I mean, we just heard this morning, if you listened to the news this morning, 3 Afghan journalists were murdered because they were Muslim women. So yes, some of them are oppressed, whether it's the Taliban, ISIS, some of them are oppressed. They're oppressed because they live in patriarchal societies, run by tradition and not Islamic jurisprudence. I really don't want anyone to think that Islam and tradition are the same. Islam and culture are the same. They are not. Those are two separate, totally separate entities. So it's Western ideas, not those of Islam, that have triggered uproar around female oppression and Muslim women's submissiveness to the dominant male figures in their lives. Most Muslim women are very confident and leave very little room for the men in their lives to stop them from doing what they want to do or exercise their rights as Muslim women. Islam is a religion of peace that calls for female liberation, education, protection, and respect. God promotes education for both men and women. It's not just for one, and Dr. Harris mentioned that earlier. The Quran provides women with their birthright and equal status. Islam delivers women from being treated as second-class citizens, which they often were prior to Islam, and it often offers them respectable status and standing. people really don't know, and I think I would like to say it because we might be able to shed light on that, but people really don't know that the Quran and Islam gave women more liberation than any other religion that I know of so far. It's a religion of peace, and it provides women with all kinds of rights. They've been known historically, and this is true, Muslim women have been known historically to be heads of state and very successful entrepreneurs. And if you really want to think about it, the Prophet Muhammad's wife was one of the most successful businesswomen in history. A female leader was considered an honor, not a disgrace. We couldn't get Hillary Clinton to become our president. A lot of people didn't want her because she was a woman. Muslim women were head of states hundreds of years ago, and we still haven't had a Muslim president in this country. It is a female president in this country. It's only centuries later that Islamic law was replaced with chauvinistic principles and misogynistic traditions. Accurate interpretations of Sharia or Islamic jurisprudence do not order women to be retired or secluded from society. Rather, they are granted freedom and nearly equal status with their male counterparts. Muslim women will continue to recover what Islamic law had awarded them to begin with, and will work toward achieving and maintaining equal status with men. It's true that they face daily survival struggles, but it's not the veil or the burqa or that lie at the foundation of those struggles. They battle with the political and economic unrest in their countries and elsewhere. Many of those who wear the head cover experience rampant discrimination and constant surveillance in the United States and in other Western cultures, as opposed to those who are like myself. People probably won't know whether I'm Muslim or not because a lot of us just blend in with everybody else. But those who do wear the cover, I feel bad because even in Dearborn, a 57-year-old John Dillis viciously attacked a 19-year-old. She's just standing at Beaumont Hospital doing nothing. And he viciously, not only attacked her, he viciously beat her. No reason. And there are many more like that I don't have time to mention right now. But there's a lot of discrimination that's going on. And in the end, no matter what, it just makes them stronger in the face of Islamophobia. Islam is at the heart of their piety, and hate crimes are just out there. And this is why we're here, so we can try to reduce or at least eliminate a lot of the hate crimes that are going on in this country. Islam does not have a Democratic face, and it doesn't have a Republican face. It plays no role in judging people for their beliefs, specifically believers in monotheistic religions. This doesn't mean that third-generation Arab Americans like me don't feel the need to respect Muslim culture and tradition. The reason I love my country, which is this country, is because I'm free to live my life the way I want to be live it, and not be judged or criticized. I'm very conservative myself and traditional, but honestly, I also see myself quite liberal. When I look at my daughters, I feel sometimes that they're more conservative than myself. So I felt controlled when I was young. I'm not going to hide any of that. And you will see that if you ever get a chance to read my books or listen to the interviews. And thank you, Siham had interviewed me once, and Glenn O'Cray. And I left some of that in my chat. I pasted my links if you ever want to see those. I published articles about my life, my books, my memoir. And if you do get a chance to read them, you'll learn more about Muslim women, Islam, and education, and to clarify what it's like to live in this country while being an Arab American Muslim. So we must learn to refrain from judging others based on their religion or physical appearances. People do not deserve to be judged for dressing modestly or for wearing a Quran, a cross, or a Star of David around their necks. Who are we to judge? We are only human, and only God can judge. He's the final judge. So I'm going to leave and wrap this up with a verse that many Muslims are familiar with. O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and female, and made you into nations and tribes, that you may know each other, not despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of God is he who is the most righteous of you. And God has full knowledge and is well acquainted. Dr. Harris, thank you very much for allowing me to talk for a few minutes on this topic. I think you're muted.
I just want what? Oh, am I muted? Can you hear me?
Okay. Oh, I can hear you now.
I just want to say one of Mary's books is very special to me. It's called A Sprinkle of Dust, and Mary went through the very painful of losing a child years ago, and it's in that book. And I did too many funerals for children in about 30 years in the ministry, and I ordered a copy of her book for every one of those mothers, sent it to them, and they just it just meant the world. So I mean, we might be from different religious backgrounds, but the human sadnesses, joys, hurts are the same. And Mary's book was a great source of strength to a lot of women that I knew who went through the same thing she did. Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Saeed Kazwini.
Good afternoon, and I greet you all with the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum. It is my great honor to be on this panel this afternoon with my dear brother Sel and my respected sisters Mary and Siham. First, I would like to sincerely thank our friends at the Union Presbyterian Seminary and the Leadership Institute for facilitating this program, for hosting this program. And I sincerely thank Sel for putting so much time and effort in facilitating this program. I'll start by letting you know a little bit about my family background and how we came to the United States. My family traces its roots to the city of Karbala, Iraq. It is a holy city in that there is a historical shrine that marks the martyrdom of the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, Imam Hussein, who rose to reject injustice, and as a result, he was massacred in Karbala, Iraq. Later, this became a very important religious city. So my family comes from Karbala, Iraq. My grandfather was very vocal during the Ba'athist regime in criticizing some of their policies and some of the injustices that they would commit in Iraq. As a result, he was persecuted. He was imprisoned, jailed a number of times in the 60s and early 70s. And there was a moment in 1970 where they wanted to execute him. So he fled to Kuwait, and he took, the entire family with him. And then from there to Iran, and then from Iran to the United States, to Los Angeles. Saddam Hussein has executed 19 members of my relatives. So you can just see that history of persecution in Iraq and why my family had to leave. So I was born in Qom, Iran, because my parents were in Iran at the time. But when I was 7, we immigrated to the US. My grandfather had already settled in Los Angeles in the mid-80s. So when my parents came to the US, we went to Los Angeles, California to start our lives there. I was 7 years old at the time. Then in 1992, my father was invited by the Dearborn community, the Detroit Dearborn community, to come and speak during the month of Ramadan. When he came and he saw the size of the community, the energy in the community, he decided to relocate from Los Angeles to Dearborn. So I did a part of my schooling in the LA area, and then I completed my academic education in Michigan. First, I went to Wayne State, and then I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I studied sociology. But because I come from, this family that traces its roots to Karbala, Iraq, to the seminaries, to scholarship and the religious sciences, I was determined to go to the seminary myself and be trained there. So in 2004, I moved from Michigan to Qom, Iran. Qom is the city that basically has the largest Shia seminary in the world. Muslims are primarily Sunnis, and then you have the Shias. The largest Shia seminary is in Qom, Iran. So I studied there for about 10 years. And just a few years ago, I came back to Michigan with my family. And I am now an assistant imam at the Islamic Institute of America in Dearborn Heights, Michigan. And I established the Hujjah Islamic Seminary, which is the first comprehensive English seminary here in North America. Dearborn is a very interesting place, as you've already heard from Dr. Harris and from our respected sister Mary. You'll hear more about Dearborn. We have a long history, Muslim Americans have a long history here in the Dearborn area. What attracted so many Muslims to come to Dearborn is that, about a century ago, 80, 90 years ago, Henry Ford was offering very generous wages at the assembly line. So a lot of Muslims were fleeing persecution from the Levant, the Syrian, Lebanese, Palestinian territories. There were civil wars. The financial crisis was big. So many were looking for better opportunities. And they actually came and immigrated to the US. Just yesterday, we lost a lady in our community, a 90-year-old lady. Yesterday, they asked me to speak at her funeral. In 1940, she immigrated to Michigan. And she took the 30-day steamship ride across the Atlantic. So I just want our viewers to know that many, many Muslim Americans, especially those in the Dearborn area, they have a long history in this area. Now, we have a lot of challenges, even though we have a big community. There are many Muslims, scattered all over the country. But we have our challenges. Mary mentioned, the challenge of the hijab. A lot of Muslim women wear the hijab. And because they wear the hijab and it's visible, it makes them easy targets for, people who want to discriminate, for racists, for white supremacists, for Islamophobes. And this does create a challenge for many Muslim women. Especially the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of, Muslim women have been concerned with the rhetoric that we were seeing around the country, the discrimination. After 9/11, things became very difficult for Muslims because many Americans did not know much about Muslim Americans. And so they would basically hear what's on the news about, Muslims, about, Islam and violence, about Muslim women being oppressed, in Muslim communities or in the religion of Islam. And it's just interesting, based on my personal experience in interacting with non-Muslims and how the media shapes their opinions. Mary, you mentioned Khadija, right? Khadija, the wife of the Prophet. She was an independent businesswoman. In fact, she was the richest businesswoman in Arabia during that time. Once I was on a plane coming back from Canada during a program in the month of Ramadan. So a Canadian lady was sitting next to me. She saw my religious attire, so she had interesting questions about Islam. She told me, look, I'll be honest with you. I don't have a favorable understanding of Islam when it comes to women. It seems to me, based on what I've seen from the media, that they're oppressed and the Quran bans them from driving. And now, mind you, this lady was very educated. She had a PhD, and she's saying this. I told her, do you know when the Quran was revealed? She's like, well, I don't know, but a long time ago. I'm like, yes, a very long time ago. We're talking about 14 centuries ago. Do you really think there were cars back then for the Quran to ban women from driving? Like, how does that add up to you? She kind of felt embarrassed, to accept these thoughts from the media. But then I told her exactly what Mary said about Khadija, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad. I told her 14 centuries ago, there was a very successful, independent businesswoman. And she had men working for her. So she meets this young man. He was 25 years old. She fell in love with his character, with his honesty, And so he worked for her. Then she proposed to him. He married her. Do you know who that is? She's like, no, I've never heard of the story. I told her that's our Prophet Muhammad. He chose Khadija to be his wife, not some woman who was locked up in her house, didn't know what was going on around the world, didn't have any experience, fully dependent on others. What does that tell you about our religion? She just started to cry when she heard the story. She's like, you Muslims need to do more to tell us non-Muslims about, your religion and your experience and your experiences. So it's been an interesting journey. And one last thing I'll mention about my attire for those viewers who are interested what it signifies. So wearing the turban and the cloak is a way to emulate the Prophet Muhammad. According to our historical reports, he would wear this on many occasions. And it also indicates that I've studied in the seminary. And the color black, because you have different colors, the white and the black. The black one indicates that I am a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. So I have our family tree, and we are 44 generations away from the Prophet Muhammad. So I look forward to this webinar and to the Q&A part as well. God bless you all.
Siham.
There we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you so much for that that wonderful information. And Sayyid Kazwini, right on point. And some of those things were things that I wanted to discuss as well. So, Sal, thank you for putting this together. And thank you to the Union Presbyterian Seminary as well. I think the conversation about Islam is one that desperately needs to happen, and I think we need to work with facts and history and how Islam has meant to be actually implemented. And I think regarding the national and international things that have happened, it's sort of been skewed in regards to what Islam is about. When Mary and Sayyid Kazwini both say Islam is a religion of peace, it really is. And it's not just a religion where you follow faithfully. It is a way of life. And I think that's where my life has been sort of shaped in regards to Islam, because I believe that Islam tells you that you have to make sure that you do good deeds. And you are judged in how you treat marginalized communities. You have to have a clear conscience. Once you have a clear conscience, you know that you followed the concept of Islam. You have to be able to have good intentions. If your intentions are good towards your family, towards your neighbors, towards your brothers and sisters, you are actually following the concept of Islam. I grew up in the 60s, born and raised here in Dearborn and Dearborn Heights. And I went to the mosque on Joy Road. And my dad, rest his soul, actually came here in 1906. So he made that faithful trip to on the boat. And he actually started in Sioux Falls and went to Sheboygan, Michigan, and then sort of came here. He was very young. He was about 13, 14 when he came. And he was sort of self-made. He had to deal with things on his own, sort of, very young, very, very little in his pocket, but was able to move forward. And then he was one of the founders of the Islamic Center in America on Joy Road. And so I lived most of my life there. Everything that we did really surrounded the mosque. Everything that we did sort of surrounded our religious aspirations and that shaping of who we were and our family. And for me, my family was just not my mom and my dad and my sister, my uncles and aunts. It was all the hamos and hamtos and khaltos. So we were all a huge family. And when we go to the mosque, I never knew whether I was going to end up back home or where we were going to end up, being together at someone's house after we had breakfast at the mosque, or, did whatever we needed to do. So it was really a community. And it was all tied around religion, around good deeds, and around who we are as human beings. And I think the issue of humanity is the most important thing that I've learned. And also going through the mosque, I learned that you could not be a Muslim. You could not say that you believe in Islam without respecting and accepting the other religions that came prior to. So Islam was a culmination of all religions, and the difference between Jesus Christ and Prophet Muhammad is that Prophet Muhammad was the seal of the prophets, and Jesus Christ is mentioned many more times in the Quran than is Prophet Muhammad. And when you talk about the Virgin Mary, the hijab and the scarf really are emulations of that, of purity and modesty. So there are so many different overlays in regards to Islam and to Christianity, Judaism, and the monolithic religions that came prior to. So for me, I grew up respecting all religions. We would literally host people from the synagogue. We would host people from the different churches, and we literally had to go and be hosted by them as well, because it was a learning process. You needed to be able to respect others, accept their traditions, accept their differences, and appreciate them to make you whole. So it was not fearing what you didn't know. We had to know in order to accept and basically enrich our lives for the other individuals that maybe believed a little bit different or had different traditions. But in those conversations, we found out that we were more alike than we were different. Very, very, very few differences and more similarities, which brought us all together. And regarding, me growing up, in my household, it was always education, education, education. That was the primary conversation. Get your education, get your degree, because no one can take that away from you. And so for me, I honestly have to say, I never thought that women in Islam were oppressed at all, because it was always a very open conversation, especially in our mosques. I never wore a headscarf at all, even in the mosque. We did wear it when we went into the prayer area. That was mandatory, but for the longest time, the headscarf was not mandatory. And again, I think Mary touched upon that very well. It is a choice, and it's something that, people have to have that conviction for. And I respect that many of my dearest friends who I grew up with didn't wear a scarf until very recently. And I love that, and I respect that. And we all have our vision, but it's okay, because we do have choices, and Islam definitely, encourages that concept of choice. And women in Islam, my daughter sort of got me onto this TikTok thing, and I actually used a TikTok in one of my diversity trainings that I did for 60 lawyers. And this TikTok showed a man and a woman, and they were both Muslim. And the woman was talking about, hey, listen, we as women, we have a lot more rights in Islam than men do. First of all, women were allowed to own property. They were allowed to actually vote prior to our suffrage movement here in the United States. And also, if a woman works, the money that she makes is totally hers. She does not have to share with her family. She does not have to do anything with it. The man has to share. He has to provide for his family. And, they talk about inheritance, and they say women can't have, they don't get the same exact inheritance as the man. Well, the woman's inheritance that she gets for herself. She doesn't have to share. She doesn't have to provide for anything. But the male who gets the inheritance has to help with the family and help with that inheritance. So that makes sense to me, right? So I believe when you talk about culture and tradition, and you talk about the suppression of women, it is not the religion of Islam that is the suppressive aspect of this. It is more the interpretation and maybe the patriarchal kind of movement that wants to suppress that freedom for women in Islam. So I'm going to leave it there, and I look forward to our conversation. Oh, I was also, I wanted to add, for someone like me to be a Sunday school teacher as well. I taught Sunday school for about 3 years at the Islamic Center, and honestly, you know, I know that we have the different sect, and I'm born Shia, but I didn't know that there was a Sunnah and Shia, because I believe the Quran is one, and we are all one, and we believe in the same thing. And I think those logistics don't really process well for me. So for me, Islam is Islam. It's a religion of peace. It's a religion of rights. It's a religion of love, and it's a religion of freedom. So thank you, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Siham. And you know, in many ways, Muslims in America have done a much better job than Christians in America have of promoting. Well, Christian communities still fight. They do. And the different communities each claims to have the truth, whereas the Islamic community has done a much better job, I think, of saying, well, you know, only God is truth. Religions point to the truth, and I think that the American Muslim community has done a much better job. You said something about religions being related. It reminded me of a book written by the late Dr. Alija Izetbegovic, who was the president of Bosnia, a Muslim scholar, a lawyer. He wrote a book called Islam Between East and West, and he said there are two histories of Islam. One is the history of Islam following the coming of the Prophet Muhammad. The second history is the history before the coming of the Prophet Muhammad. What he's talking about is mainly Judaism and Christianity, and that you've got to understand those. One of our students on Wednesday mornings at Al Hujjah is a Turkish woman. Her husband is a Bosnian Muslim. They live in Chicago, and he was the only one in his family to survive the massacre at Srebrenica 25 years ago, when 10,000 Bosnian Muslims were massacred by Serbian Christians in Srebrenica. And you know, when I think about President Izetbegovic's book about knowing that those histories of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are related, and thank you for pointing that out. Wow, how wonderful. Before we move on to the next thing, let me just tell one quick thing, since we are kind of coming off of Black History Month. One of my dear Muslim friends, my late brother, Imam Warathdin Muhammad of Chicago, he was the son of Elijah Muhammad, who formed the Nation of Islam. And Warathdin Muhammad broke with his father and led African-American Muslims out of the Nation of Islam into mainstream Islam, where they are today. And I had Warathdin Muhammad in 2006 came and spoke to the last church I served. He has another claim to fame too, and he was the one that encouraged Malcolm X to go on the Hajj. Malcolm X was a militant nationalist before that, and at the Hajj in Mecca, Malcolm X wrote his very famous letter from the Hajj that, growing up as a white man in Virginia, I didn't know about until I was in my 40s. I'm 62 today, so I've only known 20 years. And it should be a classic in American religious traditions. And in his letter from the Hajj, he began by saying three things that most people won't say. I was wrong. He said, here I am in Mecca, eating and drinking from the same plates and cups as white men, black men, yellow men, red men, yellow men, running all around. He said, we are all one family of God, just like the Quran says. Whether we're different religious groups, we are one family. And then he said this, and this is the point of this webinar today: America needs to understand Islam. And that's what you're helping. The three of you are helping, starting today, for some people out there in this webinar who may be hearing this all for the very, very first time. Couple of questions I want to ask, and I want to go quickly because I think we're going to have, I see my chat thing. I think people have questions for y'all, but in the class that I teach at Hujjah, I get messages from my students. They all want to know books they need to read. And here's the reason why, and I applaud them and I love them for this. They want to know how to talk about Islam to their Christian friends so they can understand. They want to know, all about that. And I told one of them, I said, one of the things that Christians ask me is, now that Muslims are in America, what kind of holidays do they celebrate? All of you talked about family things. Anybody want to speak to that? Tell us. Now, the mosques that I know of during Ramadan, of course, not in the age of COVID, but most mosques I know have dinners every night of Ramadan where non-believers invite to eat dinner and learn about the religion. So tell me something about, because I want American Christians to know that they have holiday traditions. So do you. So anybody want to share something?
Can I share something real quick?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Like Siham said, when we were young, the Islamic Center of America was probably just a small little room on Dix in Dearborn. But our parents, there weren't that many Muslims and there weren't that many Arab Americans. And our parents really, like my grandfather, like hers, came around the turn of the century. I think he came around 1896. And my mother was born in Dearborn and whatever. We would go, my sister and I would go to the church, celebrate holidays. And we'd celebrate Easter. We'd get dressed for Easter with our Easter baskets and eggs. And then we'd go to the mosque and celebrate the Eid. And my mother would dress us for the Eid. And then we didn't have Christmas. My mother wore Santa Claus clothes one day and came over and gave everybody gifts. So my mom was Santa Claus. So today, I think there's more restrictions on, okay, well, that's not for them. That's not for them. This is for us. This is for them. I still, run our practices as we did when we were young. We don't differentiate. But today there's more restrictions, I think, because there's more Muslims than there were before. And so they kind of want to segregate and kind of show, well, we don't celebrate this. We don't celebrate. But the majority do. The majority blend. The majority celebrate all the festivities that go on in this country.
Wow. Thank you, Mary. Anybody else want to add something? Well, let me just speak to that right there. I have a dear friend. She's part of the Shia community in the Silver Spring, Maryland area. She and I do a common Facebook post at Christmas time. Now and Amberine is the one who started it. And then I but every year she would put this in her post to all of her Christian friends. And she's a devout Shia Muslim. Quran 3, verse 45. And remember when the angel said, Mary, God gives you glad tidings of a word from him to be called the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, highly honored in this world and the hereafter, and one of those near stationed to God. That's from the Quran, but a Christian could believe that. So now she puts that, and right, I put mine. I put this from New Testament, Luke 2:10-11, almost the same. The angel said to them, do not be afraid, for see, I'm bringing you good news of a great joy for all people. For to you is born this day a Savior, who is the Messiah. Now, the Arabic word for Messiah in a Arabic translation of the Bible is the same Arabic word as Messiah that you see in the Quran. Right. And that's what Amberine and I do. We do this together. This is the second year we've done that. Very quickly,
2 months ago, we celebrated the birth of Jesus and Christmas at our own mosque. Right. Now, we may celebrate it differently than how many Christian denominations would at their churches, but we did celebrate Christmas.
Well, let me show you how this Muslim this Muslim woman that came. Oh, Siham, you want to say something?
Just really quickly, I remember.
Yeah, go ahead.
I remember celebrating Christmas ever since I can actually remember. We've always had a Christmas tree. And even, you know, in the mosque, Imam Shuri, Mary probably.
Oh, yeah.
Him.
He's in this book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My mom is actually in that book. And yes, we were at the wedding.
Okay. Who you are there.
Yes. You know, it was always part of appreciating, you know, the other religions, but yet I don't know if very many people, you know, understand this. And even with my trainings that I do, that Jesus Christ is an integral part of Islam. We do believe in the virgin birth. We do believe in Virgin Mary. So those things, the only difference is, and maybe Sayyid Kazwini can talk to this a little bit better, but my understanding is the only difference is that we believe that Jesus Christ is a major personality in history and religion, just as the Prophet Muhammad is. And the difference is Prophet Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. There were no other prophet that came after him. So there comes that distinction. But in regards to, you know, the importance of Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary within the religion of Islam, they are as important. And I think for me, the largest difference may be in that Islam, you when you worship and believing in that faith, is that the faith is between you and God. It's a direct line between you and God. So there isn't that, you know, there isn't a middleman. So you are accountable to your actions. You are accountable to who you are and what you do. And so I really believe that when you look at the logistics of the religions, there may be some, you know, some differences, but when you look at the concept and the goals and and who we are spiritually and within humanity, I think we all strive for the same thing.
Thank you, Siham. Sayyid Kazwini, do you want to say something to that?
Yes, I think also our viewers are interested in some Islamic holidays that we celebrate here in the U.S.
Yes.
So we have the month of Ramadan, 30 days we fast. And to end that fast, we gather on the day of Eid, either at the mosque, community center, with our families, and we celebrate it. It's one of those big celebrations that we have. We also have, you know, the birth of important figures in our Islamic history, like the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. We'll celebrate it. 3 days ago, we celebrated the birth of Imam Ali, the son-in-law, the successor, and the cousin of Prophet Muhammad. So we have these interesting celebrations throughout our calendar. The birth of Fatima, the daughter's prophet, and which we also consider it traditionally as Mother's Day as well. We also have the Hajj season, where Muslims go to the pilgrimage and they make the sacrifice there. We celebrate that as a holiday as well. We have Ashura, which is a mourning period that we mark to observe, you know, for the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, who's buried in Karbala, Iraq. So in addition to Thanksgiving, Martin Luther King Day, Christmas, the ones that we mentioned, we also celebrate these Islamic events throughout the year.
Thank you. I wanted to tell really quickly, and I tell you, time flies. So we're going to go see some of these questions. But the family we brought here from Baghdad, now you know they know that in the Quran Jesus is born under a palm tree, and you know it's a little bit different from the Bible, but. They came to our house for a dinner one time, and Maha, the mother, just kept going to the manger scene and said, something just isn't right. You mean you believe Jesus was born out here away from everybody? Well, I thought I better look into this. So apparently there are two Greek words for inn, I-N-N. One is the Greek word for like a Hampton Inn or Holiday Inn. The other is an inn, which means is your guest house at your home. So when Jesus and Mary were told there's no room in the inn, it didn't mean the Holiday Inn was booked. It meant that the guest house. And Maha said her house she grew up in had a guest room for guests that the door opened to the outside. that Kenneth Bailey in his book Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes points out that in Palestinian homes at that time, the manger was inside the house. You kept your animals in your house because that was your wealth. So I thought, oh my gosh, Jesus really wasn't born at the back of someone's yard. He was born in a warm house. And that was probably the best Christmas Eve sermon I ever did. It upset some people because those family heirloom mangers were now obsolete because that's not the way it happened. But my point is, that was a great interfaith experience where a woman from the Middle East said, no, nobody in the Middle East would have done this to a pregnant woman. They would have taken her inside. And you know what? Maha was right. She was right. Okay. Let's see. Oh, 311. Let's take some questions. I'm going to punch this right here. I don't have Ollie here. All right. Let's see here.
Dr. Harris, would you like to welcome Imam Ilahi? It says in the comment section that he's here, and then we can proceed.
Okay, all right. Let me. Where is he? Imam Ilahi, where are you?
Oh. I can see his chair. Okay, now we can see.
There he is. Imam Ilahi, how are you doing, my brother? Good to see you. How are you?
Salam rahmatullah. Salam everyone.
Assalamu alaikum.
Sayyidina and Dr. Mary, Sister Saham, and Dr. Sel.
It's so good. I'm so glad you were able to join us. My first trip to Dearborn was at the guest of Imam Ilahi. I want to tell a quick story. Do all of you from Dearborn, do you know Imam Ilahi and Jennifer's daughter Fatima? Do you all know her? When I first met Fatima, I was staying in his house, and Fatima was about 4 years old at the time. And she said, do you want to know what I want to be when I grow up? I said, I would love to know. What do you want to be? She said, I am going to be one of those doctors that takes the baby out of the mom's tummy. That's what I'm going to do one day. Is she still going to do it?
You have to ask her again. I don't know if she changed her mind, but next time, it's a good question.
Well, she was very, very clear about that. It's so good to have you here. Do you want to take a couple of minutes to say who you are?
You covered everything. I think, mashallah, everybody, perfect job. You covered the history, the struggles, challenges, opportunities, the issue of education, really the developments of the community, the interfaith, good relationship with neighbors, understanding with other religions. I think you made a very powerful message today, and we hope that we continue this kind of outreach. There is a serious need, as everybody mentioned, the evil of ignorance, that our worst enemy is jahl, ignorance, and that is enemy number one, and the only way to win our war against ignorance is education, and that's what you've been doing today. Thank you.
Well, I want to tell you something. I think another one of those evil things is the evil of asabiya, which is an Arabic word which means in place of supporting and promoting the community of all human beings, despite whatever religion, whatever racial group, whatever ethnicity, male, female. Asabiya is when we move into tribalism, ethnicity, white supremacy, things like this, which is really bad. I want to say something that I think could be a challenge to the entire religious community of America. I want to read from a book. It's called The Fourth Great Awakening and the Future of Egalitarianism, written by an economist named Robert William Vogel. And he, let me read something to you. He wrote in this book, chapter 1. Americans are more deeply divided and angry with each other than any other time since the 1850s. Now as then, boy, I need to get some light here. Now as then, we are at each other's backs. We are finding reasons not to get along. We're finding reasons to mistrust one another. We're finding reasons to fight. Now, I would have thought that might have been written last week. It was written in the year 2000. And what he's predicting is America may be moving into another great awakening. And as you know, there have been three others in American history, which were times where religious groups took the forefront to bring about national healing. Now, he says what's going to be different about this great awakening, and their awakenings have lasted sometimes 50 years at a time. He said this awakening will not be led by Christians. It will be led by an interfaith community of American religious groups. I think that is very, very, very possible. And I hope that if Robert Vogel is right, Imam Elahi, when Governor Whitmer had her life threatened, you were one of the ones who went and marched with her. That made a difference. The Muslim community was right there. I've read stories how when the pandemic shut down, Muslim groups all over the country went to national parks and did the cleaning. I hope that if Vogel is right, and we do need another time we could kind of come together, I hope he's right, that it really will be an interfaith thing, which should be led by men and women. Siham, back to the thing about women, you're so right. Did you know that the Islamic laws of inheritance are so good, and they include women too, that basically they create an economic middle class in 3 generations. We in America didn't create the middle class. Islam did. That's the truth. And when the French went to Algeria in 1830 and the British went to Muslim India in 1600, they both saw the same thing. The French in Algeria and the English in India in 1600. They saw a vibrant middle class that was surviving economically, socially, men, women equal. And the Europeans said, we can't have that. If they have that kind of middle class, we can't control them. So you know what the Europeans did? The French and Algerian, they abolished the Islamic laws of inheritance and instituted European primogeniture, which meant the oldest male got it all. They immediately had a class system, and the French control Algeria and the British control India. But you're right about that. Women have equal rights under the Islamic laws of inheritance. Okay, let's see here. Let me see what. Yeah.
Can I add one?
Yes.
The Sikh community, which is very, very, very prominent in regards to ensuring that there is no caste at all, or identification of class, and so that's why you have the last name as Kaur for the women and Singh for the men, and so that was done to eliminate that sense of different classes, and I think Islam has really been based on that. So when you really look at the religious aspect of Islam and the theology, if you would, of people and the fact that everyone is created equal, Islam really adheres to that concept. But I think it's sort of changed within the translation and within the implementation. And so Mary said it so eloquently at the beginning. When you talk about culture and tradition, it's very different than when you actually talk about the faith and the pillars and the actual theory of what Islam is about. So it was to bring equality to all. I mean, I'm married to an amazing Muslim man who came here when he was 18 years old, and I would not be able to do the things that I do without his support and his encouragement. And so I think that concept of women being, subservient or being, less than what they should be, is again more of a cultural aspect than a religious aspect. Because I think if men were to follow the religion correctly, there would be respect, there would be equality, and there would be, a sense of humanity across the board. So
that's well said, Siham. And I think the challenge, what you just beautifully laid out, the preamble of the Constitution, our Constitution, which you read, in order to form a more perfect union. Now, in 1776, the framers knew they had work to be done. Women still didn't vote. African Americans were still enslaved. Native Americans had their land stolen from them. And Jefferson admired the way Native Americans did things. Did you know that in the Iroquois Federation, all the East Coast Native Americans, there was something called the Iroquois Council. And there were two rules. Only men could serve on the Iroquois Council. That's the first rule. Second rule is only women could do the voting. So you tell me who had the power. But back to the Constitution. They knew there was work to be done. That's our job. That's our job today. We have religious freedom. We are a multicultural, multi-religious society. We have different ethnicities. We are a nation of immigrants. And it's up to all of us, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, men, women, all different racial groups, to make sure that we get closer and closer to that more perfect union. I believe that. And that's going to take men and women from all faith groups. It's up to us. That's what the framers left for us, a mechanism to get it done. They knew they didn't get it all done. And I think that's kind of where we are. And I've had the two shortest periods of time. The first was this morning when I taught my class at Hujjah, which is the quickest 2 hours of the week for me. And here it is already 3:23, and our time is almost over. And I feel like we're just getting started. In a minute, Sayyid Kazwini, I'm going to ask you if you'd give us a benedictory prayer. Would you do that for us? You could do it in Arabic if you want it. The people may not know what it is, but
Sure,
I'd
absolutely.
like to. What's that?
Absolutely. Dr. Harris, do you mind if I answer just a couple of questions from the comments from our viewers?
Yes, you please do. Yes.
So one of the viewers is asking, is there an Islamic counterpart to Paul's statement that we are saved by grace through faith? Yes, the Holy Quran is very clear that salvation comes through faith. However, that faith must be confirmed by good deeds, by good actions. If a person claims to have faith, but their actions do not confirm that, that's not full faith that will earn us salvation. And it does come through grace, absolutely. God is the one who guides us. We make the effort, we open our hearts to the truth, but in the end, He is the one who guides us according to the Quran. That's one question that we have here.
And please keep going. Ali does this for me in the morning. I'm happy for you to do it now. Go right ahead. Keep going, please.
Okay, I'll just briefly answer the second question. One of our viewers is asking, what do we Muslims believe about Jesus being crucified, and was He raised? Is He coming back? So the Quran tells us that there was an attempt to crucify Him because He was a reformer. He did bring a new message. So there was resistance. There was an attempt to crucify Him. But the Quran tells us Muslims that God saved Him from that attempt. Someone else was crucified. God raised Him to the heavens. And we Muslims are waiting for the Messiah to come back with our Christian brothers. We believe that at the end of times, He will come back to establish justice on earth, the kingdom of God on earth. And we believe He's going to come back with the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, who's known by the Mahdi, the guided one. They will work together in bringing, Muslims and Christians and others. But when you have Muslims and Christians, that's over half of the global population, at least today. So when they come together, they will establish justice. So that's our belief on Jesus. Sel, if you can unmute yourself.
And if you go in that mosque, do you know what's inside? There's a little shrine church right in the middle of that mosque to John the Baptist. A lot of Christians don't know that. You can see a picture of it. Because John Yahya is also a person that figures prominently in Islamic history. I hope people will see after this hour and a half that there is more that unites us than divides us. There really is. And I hope, inshallah, one day when this COVID gets, that I can bring people to Dearborn for Christians to see and to know what I have seen and known. And part of that is the wonderful people of which the four of you are fine ambassadors for your very, very, very beautiful town. It really is. And so I look forward to that day when that can happen. I really do. Thank you all so very, very, very much. Thank you. An hour and a half is a quick time, but I think you have just whetted the appetite. My text message has been going on. Some of my older people don't know how to do messages on this, so they send it here. Any final words from any of you before Sayyid Kazwini dismisses us? Anybody else have?
Want to ask Dr. Mary, how's your brother doing now? We have a chance to see you and talk to you. He was in the hospital, or is he at home now?
No, I'm sitting on pins and needles, and I'm asking for as many prayers as we can get. He's still non-responsive.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sending prayers your way, Mary.
all your prayers will help. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We will certainly lift him in our prayers, Mary. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just want to say thank you for putting this together. I think these conversations are so vital because there are so many stereotypes, if for lack of a better word, out there. And I just hope that people will educate themselves. You know, you talked about a certain verse, and it is about knowledge. Knowledge is power, and knowledge really dissipates any fear factor, because once you know the truth, once you educate yourself, it dissipates that fear, and you're more apt to accept, understand, and be part of it. You know, I think we can all live together in the essence of humanity, religiously speaking, ethnically speaking, and we need to all strive and work in our little corners of the world to get to that concept of humanity where we are all accepting. And it depends on that lens that we look through. So that lens has to be looked through in the face of knowledge and understanding. And thank you, Sal.
Well said. Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. Imam Elahi, Mary, thank you all. Sayyid Kazwini, will you dismiss us, please, sir?
Thank you. In the name of the Almighty God, the compassionate, the merciful, we are infinitely grateful to you, O God, Allah, for providing us this wonderful opportunity to meet virtually today to celebrate our shared humanity. We thank you for the diversity, our dear Lord. Our dear Lord, we ask you to help us to make this world an oasis of peace, to repel discrimination and racism. We ask you to allow us to follow into the footsteps of your great prophets and messengers, Prophet Abraham, Prophet Moses, Prophet Jesus, and the last of them, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. And I'll conclude by reciting the opening chapter of the Holy Quran, which is a beautiful prayer that we make. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen.
Amen.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you,
our
sisters
dear
and brothers.
panelists. It was my great honor. Thank you.
My great honor too. I look forward to seeing all of you in Dearborn again very, very soon. I'm gonna bring my wife this time, okay? I'm gonna do it. Salam.
Bye-bye.
Salam.
Thank you all.